For a senior in high school, there are generally multiple things that could excite them. It could be graduation, it could be prom, homecoming. Honestly, though, I don't think that was the case for my grade. My high school teacher managed to keep this bag safe for us through COVID and the Texas snowstorms, and luckily this past weekend I was able to go down and ask him a bit more about this event.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Todd Pipes, lead vocalist and bass player for Deep Blue Something, recording artist in my earlier life, and in the last 14 to 15 years I've been an adjunct associate professor of English for Colorado Christian University, teaching English at Faith Christian School. So from because I know everybody remembers things differently, so I remember it being kind of a two-phase thing. So the first one was, on Fridays during football season, the cheerleaders give the football players tons of like sugary candy stuff. Okay. And so that particular day, Pierce Hughes had gotten this massive bag of Sour Patch Kids, like enough to feed a family of 10. And I thought, that's just too much. Like, I'm a health freak anyway. So I thought, I can't just let this kid tear into this bag of Sour Patch Kids, because he had it on his desk, because Pierce liked to kind of push things, and he knew that I hated that kind of stuff. And so I simply took it from him.
Or was it a Gatorade?
It was a Gatorade.
Gatorade.
So was it the same day then? Okay, well either way, so maybe I had the Sour Patch Kids and then he gets out the Gatorade. Either way, my solution was to take the Gatorade and pour it into the Sour Patch Kids, which had a Ziploc on it, and seal it up and then kind of start, From there, it seems like everybody immediately said, let's save it. Okay, at least for a while. So I kept it there, and then it became, well, we've got to keep this forever. Let's look at the end of the year or something. And so it just kept kind of growing, and then at some point the decision was made, because this was sophomore year. This is when you and Pierce were sophomores. Mm-hmm. And the decision was made to keep it until the end of senior year. Yeah. So I put it on the shelf in the storage, in the English department storage closet. And we only looked into it once or twice. The thing, we let people touch it because it was strangely cold. Like it was really, really weirdly cold. Like there was a chemical reaction going on in there. Mm-hmm. And then at one point too, we did look inside of it, and it was strange because the Sour Patch things were still sort of intact in this really brown, horrible liquid that was freezing cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I remember that part of it transpiring.
Mm-hmm. So you poured Gatorade into the bag. So
yeah.
You're crazy.
Well, that was the thing. It's like, again, I'm a health freak, and Pierce had a football game that night, and it's like, long term, I don't know why the cheerleaders seem to be obsessed with giving the football team diabetes. But even short term, if Pierce had had even a third of that bag and a Gatorade, he would have been sick,
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm not having that. And the rule was that you can have water or plain tea or black coffee in my class, but nothing else, and especially nothing sugary. Mm-hmm. So he kind of knew he was pushing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least that's what I felt. And so I always take things up.
So, Snowmageddon, because this hit my mind in class like a week ago.
Okay.
Everything froze.
Yes.
And your room flooded.
Yes.
Was it a fear that this bag could have possibly exploded?
Yeah, because everything was messed up. But it wasn't the frozen part. It was that the water had gotten everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there was so much water, it ruined everything in my room. But I kind of felt like there was so much synthetic weirdness going on. I don't think there's any danger of that concoction freezing, because there's a lot of chemicals in that bag. But I didn't know. The only thing I was really worried about is when they were kind of cleaning the room that it might have gotten into the shelves and that they were going to throw it out or whatever. Oh, so thankfully none of that happened. Yeah, I forgot about Snowmageddon.
Bag was in your closet for 2 years. Did you ever consider just like, this is disgusting?
Almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years.
Remember, because that was at the beginning of sophomore year.
Yeah.
So it's sophomore year, junior year, and the end, all the way to the end of senior year.
This thing's older than COVID.
Yes.
It was in your closet
Yes.
3 years almost.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever consider just throwing it out, being like, this is disgusting, I don't want this in here?
No, I was committed because I wanted everybody to see how horrible that stuff was and that there was something odd to it, because the bag, when we did get it out at the end of your senior year, the bag was starting to deteriorate.
Yeah.
So whatever was happening inside the bag was leaching through the plastic, which should tell everybody something. So I was totally committed. There was no way.
Yeah.
And that's why I had it hidden in the back shelf, because I didn't want anybody else, the other teachers, going, what is this thing, and throwing it out. So
Did they ever see graduation?
Mm-hmm.
You, because we brought the bag to you.
Yes.
You open it up and you're just like opening it, going, oh my god.
Yeah.
What was running through your head during that?
I was worried, because you know how people can get really excited, and there were a lot of dares going around.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of talk about Pierce somehow getting credit on some, like extra credit for drinking it.
Oh my God.
We need Pierce.
I'm so scared.
And then it became, oh, let's all do shots of it at graduation. And I thought, this is where I end up getting fired, because this is going to make someone violently ill.
Not ready.
Well, just do what you can.
Put a cork on it. Yeah! It's dripping.
Even though everybody kept saying, I don't care if I get sick, or I don't care. And I'm just going, no, your parents will. This is bad. And so I'm glad that we went from the shots to everybody having the little vials. I felt much more comfortable with that, because I just didn't want anybody consuming that horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, remember, whenever I was putting it in the vials, it was so sticky and horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other teachers were going, what is going on? And they're like, that's something from Pipes' class, don't even bother. Yeah, they didn't understand the amazingness of it.
How could they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming back from this interview, I had an extreme interest in finding out what had caused the Sour Patch Kids to come out the way that they did. And one thing that Pipe said during this interview actually convinced me I needed to do this study.
And it was strange because the Sour Patch things were still sort of intact.
So when I got back home, I immediately began researching all these ingredients starting in the Sour Patch Kids themselves. Sour Patch Kids have the ingredients of cane sugar, invert sugar, corn syrup, modified cornstarch, citric acid, tartaric acid, natural and artificial flavor, and then we have food colorings yellow 6, red 40, yellow 5, and blue 1. So immediately I started off in the acids because in the name it sounds terrible. And I was like, okay. So now citric acid is what we have in pineapple, in cantaloupe. Anything that is a citrus fruit has this acid. So we have felt that burning sensation before. It's what they use to make stuff sour for us. So I wasn't completely caught off guard by that one. It was the tartaric acid, which I bet I'm saying wrong, that actually did. After a bit of research, I realized tartaric acid is just another acid found in fruit, primarily grapes and bananas, and if I remember correctly, blueberries. These two acids are actually used to preserve food. It keeps away mold, but at the same time, over the course of a few years, it can actually start growing mold itself, which seems a little contradictory, but that's what happens. With the acid, specifically citric acid, it destroys enzymes and in extreme cases can even cause tooth decay. So I definitely think this is what helped aid in this process of breaking down the Sour Patch Kids in this Gatorade mixture. The second thing I targeted was invert sugar. Now, as I said earlier, there are two sugars in Sour Patch Kids. There's cane sugar, which doesn't dissolve at all and is normally used for baking when you're making a cake and stuff like that. Invert sugar is what you would think of being in gummies or anything that has a gooey texture. It holds things together, but at the same time, it allows things to dissolve easier. That way, people can actually get the sugary taste. That's what we use for sweeteners in coffee, because cane sugar and any sugar that's natural doesn't dissolve that way. So it doesn't expire. Invert sugar, on the other hand, can, but it normally lasts well in dry conditions. This was not the case. So while this invert sugar helped keep the Sour Patch Kids together, it ultimately also hurt them, causing them to dissolve in this red Gatorade mixture and become what they were when we opened that bag. Next, I looked at the ingredients in Gatorade. Gatorade includes water, sugar, sucrose, dextrose, citric acid, salt, sodium citrate, monopotassium phosphate, gum arabic, glycerol ester of rosin, and then again our natural and artificial flavor. Now, most of these ingredients were already discussed when we were searching up the Sour Patch Kids, so I didn't have an issue with it. Sucrose and dextrose is what makes invert sugar, so then again, truly my big issue was glycerol ester of rosin, because I had no idea what that was. So it's known as ester gum and is an oil-soluble food additive. It's used in beverages and also the cosmetic industry to keep oil suspended in water. So in Gatorade, it gives that more natural fruit taste, which is where I think the natural flavoring comes from in their description. And in dry conditions, it can have a shelf life of 2 years. However, this was not a dry condition, and it was a very cold, dark condition. Darkness is normally good for stuff to keep it from expiring, but with all the mold that we had going on, it definitely broke down very quickly. After looking over all of these ingredients, I came to the conclusion that it was the tartaric acid, citric acid, and the invert sugars that caused this combination to come out the way that it did 3 years after it was made. The invert sugars, while it held many of the Sour Patch Kids together and kept them intact, also caused majority of them to dissolve in this mixture. The citric acid helps aid in this process, and while it maybe kept mold away for a bit, in a room temperature environment, it definitely allowed the mold to come over the course of these 3 years. Tartaric acid, I think, did the same, but citric acid was the main factor. Now, the food coloring dissolved over time, as anything would, and in an environment like this, it was bound to happen, and I'm still in shock that we considered letting someone drink this for extra credit. What was interesting during this entire process was seeing what kinds of things we are putting in our bodies. So I can go back and agree on pipes with them giving this to a guy before he was supposed to go and serve in a football game. But it has been fun. Thank you so much for watching. And this has been the Sour Patch Kid documentary.